I've always considered myself a straightforward man, not simple-minded, but content with the little things in life. I don't need a sprawling mansion or the latest car every few years. What makes me happy is much simpler: a cozy place to call home, good food, the occasional drink, and someone to share my days with. My idea of a perfect day is straightforward: a morning of fishing, an afternoon working on an old classic car, and an evening with the barbecue lit, a cold beer in hand, and the smell of steak on the grill. After dinner, I'd relax with a glass of bourbon, a gripping novel, and my wife beside me. Simple, low maintenance. But life wasn't always this way. My name is Mark Allen, and I'm 53 years old. I live in a small coastal town called Harbor Point in Oregon, a picturesque spot where life moves at its own pace. Standing at 5 feet 11 inches with salt and pepper hair and blue eyes, I've managed to stay in decent shape, thanks to my active lifestyle. Still, age has caught up with me in subtle ways. I've learned to adapt. I'm no movie star or athlete, just an average guy trying to find peace. My partner, Sophia, is 47 years old and stunning in every way. Her chestnut brown hair flows just past her shoulders, and her hazel eyes light up every room she enters. At 5 feet 5 inches with a slender, curvy frame, she carries herself with a grace that never fails to catch my eye. She grew up in New Mexico, and her warm demeanor reflects her southwestern roots. We've been together for 6 years, having met about a year after I moved to Harbor Point. My days here in Harbor Point follow a predictable but satisfying rhythm. I wake up at 5:30 a.m., shower, dress, and head to the kitchen for a strong cup of coffee. Breakfast is always something hearty: eggs, bacon, and toast, cooked by Sophia. Before leaving, I lean down to kiss her on the forehead. It's a small ritual, but one that grounds me. Most mornings, I'm out on my boat by 6:30, casting lines and taking in the crisp sea air. The Harbor Point Marina is my second home, where I sell my daily catch to local fish markets and shops. Some days, tourists book me for chartered fishing trips. It's good money, but I don't rely on it. Between my modest savings and the lower cost of living here, I've built a life where money isn't a constant worry. By midday, I'm back at the house where Sophia greets me with lunch, usually something fresh and light like grilled fish tacos or a colorful salad. After lunch, I clean whatever fish I've kept for ourselves and spend a couple of hours in the garage. Right now, my latest project is restoring a 1968 Ford Mustang. The work keeps my hands busy and my mind calm, and there's nothing like the satisfaction of seeing progress. Evenings are my favorite. By 6 o'clock, I'm on the porch with a glass of bourbon or a cold IPA, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Sophia joins me with her own glass of wine, and we chat about our day. Later, I fire up the grill and cook dinner: steak, chicken, or something from the sea. After dinner, we settle into the living room. Sophia and I often read side by side, though sometimes we'll put on an old movie. Whether we end the night wrapped in each other's arms or simply holding hands, there's a comfort in knowing we're both exactly where we want to be. Sophia and I aren't hermits by any means. We go to the local tavern now and then for drinks, dinner, and maybe a bit of dancing. We also host friends at our house for casual evenings. Life here is small town perfect, and I often think about how lucky I am to have found peace after the chaos I left behind. That peace, however, was shattered one night. Sophia and I were at the Mariner's Haven, the town's favorite bar, enjoying dinner with a couple of friends. It was a lively evening, full of laughter and good conversation. That's when a group walked in, 3 young men and 3 women, probably college students on spring break. At first, they blended into the crowd, chatting loudly and ordering drinks. But one of them caught my eye. She was impossible to miss, 5 feet 6 inches, with fiery red hair that tumbled in loose waves down her back. Her bright green eyes scanned the room, and she carried herself with an air of confidence that reminded me of someone I hadn't seen in years. My heart stopped. She looked exactly like Emily, my ex-wife, at that age. The memories hit me like a freight train, and I realized I was staring. Sophia leaned over and whispered, "Mark, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard. "We need to leave. Now." Sophia's brow furrowed, concern etched across her face. "Why?" What's going on? Do you see that redhead? I asked, nodding subtly toward the group at the bar. She glanced over and then back at me, her expression softening into understanding. She looks just like Emily, I finished, my voice barely above a whisper. Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. Do you think it's her? No, I said quickly. It can't be. But if it's who I think it is, we're in trouble. Let's go. Without another word, I stood, grabbed my jacket, and tossed some cash on the table. Sophia followed, glancing over her shoulder as we made our way to the door. As we stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. My mind raced, piecing together a dozen worst-case scenarios. If she saw me, if she recognized me. Mark, talk to me, Sophia said, her voice calm but firm. Who is she? I think it's Grace, I admitted, leaning against the hood of our car. Grace? Your daughter? Sophia's eyes widened. Are you sure? Not completely, I confessed, running a hand through my hair. But she looks just like Emily did at that age. And if it is her, she might be here looking for me. Sophia reached out and took my hand, her touch steadying me. What are you going to do? For now, lay low and hope she didn't see me. That night, sleep eluded me. I kept replaying the moment I saw her walk into the bar, the uncanny resemblance to Emily, and the sinking realization that my past might finally be catching up with me. The next morning, I went about my routine as best as I could. Coffee, breakfast, and a kiss on Sophia's forehead before heading to the marina. But the usual tranquility of the sea offered little comfort. My thoughts were consumed by Grace, or whoever the red-haired young woman was, and what she might want if she found me. By the time I returned home in the afternoon, Sophia was waiting for me on the porch. Her expression was unreadable. What is it? I asked, my stomach tightening. There's someone waiting for you, she said quietly. I froze. Who? She didn't need to say it. I knew. I stepped into the living room and saw her sitting on the couch. She looked up, and there was no mistaking it. It was Grace. Daddy, she said, her voice trembling. For a moment, I couldn't move. Hearing her call me that after so many years shattered something inside me. Grace, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. What are you doing here? She stood, tears brimming in her emerald green eyes. I needed to find you. I needed to know why you left. Why I left? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Grace nodded, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. For 6 years, we didn't know if you were dead or alive. No calls, no letters, nothing. You just disappeared. Do you have any idea what that did to us? I do, I admitted, my throat tightening, and it killed me every single day. Then why? She demanded, her voice rising. Why didn't you stay and fight? Why didn't you at least tell us goodbye? Sophia hovered in the doorway, her face full of concern. I turned to her and said softly, Can you give us a moment? She hesitated but nodded, retreating to the kitchen. I took a deep breath and motioned for Grace to sit. She hesitated but eventually sank back onto the couch. You deserve the truth, I began, and it's not something I'm proud of. I told her everything. How I had discovered Emily's affair with Danny, my best friend. How I had overheard their plans to drain me dry in a divorce, leaving me penniless and stripped of any ability to fight for custody of my kids. I was trapped, I said, my voice breaking. If I stayed, she would have taken everything, my money, my dignity, and worst of all, you three. She had the courts on her side. There was no way I could win. So, I did the only thing I could think of to protect you and your brothers. I left. You left us, Grace said, her voice trembling. You didn't just leave, Mom. You left us? Do you know what that felt like? We needed you, Daddy. I know, I said, tears streaming down my face. And I hated myself for it. But I made sure you had what you needed. The trust fund. Money isn't the same as having a father, she snapped. Her words cut deep, but I didn't argue. She was right. No amount of financial support could replace my presence in their lives. I found the flash drive you left, Grace said after a long silence. I saw the recordings. I heard everything Mom and Danny said about you. I froze, my heart pounding. You saw those? She nodded. At first, I was furious with you. I thought you abandoned us because you didn't care. But when I heard what Mom said, how she never really loved you, how she only saw you as a meal ticket, I started to understand. I still hated you for leaving, but I hated her more for driving you away. I never wanted you to hate her, I said softly. Why not? She ruined everything, Grace said bitterly. She treated us like burdens after you left. And Danny? He was gone within a year. Mom's life fell apart, and she blamed us for it. I shook my head, the guilt weighing heavier than ever. I didn't want you to suffer, Grace. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you. Well, it didn't work, she said sharply. Then, after a moment, her voice softened. But I think I understand now. That's why I came here. I needed to hear it from you. I'm sorry, I said, my voice cracking. I'm so sorry for everything I put you through. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I know now how much it hurt you and your brothers. Grace looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around me. I'm still mad at you, she whispered. But I missed you so much, Daddy. I hugged her tightly, unable to hold back the tears. I missed you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know. After a while, Sophia returned with tea and sat beside me. Grace regarded her curiously. So, you're the new woman in my dad's life? Grace asked, her tone lighter, but still cautious. Sophia smiled warmly. I am, and I'm glad to finally meet you. Your dad talks about you all the time. Does he? Grace asked, raising an eyebrow at me. All the time, Sophia confirmed. The tension in the room eased after Grace and Sophia started talking. Grace seemed to warm up to her, asking questions about their life in Harbor Point. Sophia, ever gracious, answered with sincerity, giving Grace a glimpse into the life I'd built since leaving. As the conversation flowed, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and regret. Grace's presence brought a flood of memories, both joyful and painful. But there was one thing I knew I had to do. I think it's time we got your brothers on the phone, I said, breaking into the conversation. Grace's face lit up with a mix of excitement and hesitation. You think they'll want to talk to you? I hope so, I said, my voice steady but uncertain. Grace pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen as she set up a video call. A moment later, the screen lit up with James and Ethan's faces. James, the eldest at 29, looked every bit the man I'd hoped he'd become, confident, calm, and serious. Ethan, at 27, had a more laid-back demeanor, with a mischievous grin that reminded me of myself at his age. Grace? What's going on? James asked, his tone cautious. Why do you look like you're about to cry? Ethan added, leaning closer to the camera. Because Grace began, glancing at me before finishing, I found him. I found Dad. The screen went silent. James's brow furrowed, and Ethan froze mid-grin. Wait, what? James finally asked. Yeah, Grace said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm sitting here with him right now. He's alive, and he wants to talk to us. I leaned forward, my face filling the screen. Hi, boys, I said, my voice shaky. It's been a long time. Ethan was the first to respond. Dad? Is that really you? It's me, I said, nodding. I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving, for not being there, but I never stopped thinking about you. James's expression was unreadable, his eyes narrowing slightly. Why now? Why are you reaching out after all this time? It's not that I didn't want to, I said, struggling to find the right words. I thought it was the only way to protect you from your mother's plans. I didn't want you to get caught in the middle of a messy fight, and I didn't know how to keep myself in your lives without exposing you to more pain. That's your excuse? James said, his voice sharp. You left us to deal with everything while you disappeared to what? Start a new life. James, Grace interjected, her voice firm. It's not that simple. You don't know everything. She explained how she had found the flash drive, how she'd seen and heard the truth about Mom and Danny's betrayal. She told them about her conversation with me, my regret, and how I had struggled with the decision to leave. Ethan was the first to respond. Dad, I don't know if I can forgive you yet, but I'm glad you're alive. I missed you. James exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. This is a lot to process. I won't lie. I'm angry. But if Grace is willing to hear you out, I guess I can try too. Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. That's all I can ask. I just want the chance to be part of your lives again, if you'll let me. By the end of the call, a tentative plan had formed. James and Ethan would visit Harbor Point that summer, giving us the chance to reconnect in person. For the first time in years, I felt hope, a fragile but real hope that my family could begin to heal. After the call ended, Grace turned to me. "They're going to need time, but I think they'll come around. Just don't run again, okay?" I smiled through my tears. "I won't. I promise." The summer arrived faster than I expected. I spent weeks preparing for James and Ethan's visit, doing everything I could to make sure their stay would be comfortable. Sophia, ever the calming presence, helped keep me grounded. "They're not coming for the house, Mark," she reminded me one evening as I frantically cleaned the garage. "They're coming for you." She was right, of course, but I still wanted everything to be perfect. When the day finally came, I stood on the porch, my heart racing as I watched a rental car pull up. James stepped out first, his tall frame and sharp features making him look every bit the man he'd grown into. Ethan followed, his easy smile and relaxed stride instantly putting me at ease. "Hey, Dad," Ethan said, clapping me on the shoulder as he walked up. "Hi, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. James hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. "Hi, Dad," he said, his tone guarded but not unkind. I pulled him into a hug, and for a moment, the tension melted away. The week that followed was everything I had hoped for. We fished, grilled, and sat around the fire pit late into the night, sharing stories and reconnecting. Grace joined us for the second half of the week, and seeing all three of my kids together brought a joy I hadn't felt in years. Sophia was a natural host, making everyone feel at home. She quickly bonded with Ethan over their shared love of cooking and impressed James with her sharp wit. By the third day, it was as if she had always been part of the family. But not everything was smooth sailing. On the fourth night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, James brought up the one topic we had carefully avoided. "Have you talked to Mom?" he asked, his tone neutral but pointed. The question hung in the air, heavy and unavoidable. "No," I admitted. "I haven't spoken to her since I left." "You know, she's going to find out eventually," he said. "Grace told her we've been in touch. It's only a matter of time before she puts the pieces together." "I figured as much," I said, sighing. "But what am I supposed to do? Show up on her doorstep and pretend everything's fine?" "No," James replied, leaning forward. "But you can't keep avoiding her. You left her with a mess, Dad. I'm not saying you need to apologize for that. She's the one who caused it. But you need to face her for closure, if nothing else." Later that night, I sat alone on the porch, staring at my phone. James's words echoed in my head. After several minutes of hesitation, I finally dialed the number I hadn't used in years. It rang twice before she answered. "Hello, Emily," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside me. There was a long pause. Then, "Mark, I didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. I didn't think I'd call," I admitted. "But things have changed. The kids, they've found me." "I know," she said sharply. "Grace told me." "What do you want?" "I want to talk," I said simply. "Face to face." We agreed to meet in a neutral location, a cafe in a nearby city where neither of us would feel cornered. I arrived early, my nerves frayed, and found a quiet table in the corner. When Emily walked in, I barely recognized her. She looked older, worn down, but there was still a sharpness in her eyes that made my chest tighten. "Mark," she said, sitting across from me. "Emily," I replied. The silence stretched for a moment before she spoke. "You've got some nerve showing your face after what you did." I could say the same. I shot back, my tone calm but firm. Her eyes narrowed. "You stole everything from me. Left me to pick up the pieces while you ran off to play house with someone else. I took what I earned." I corrected her. "And I left because you gave me no other choice. You betrayed me, Emily. You planned to take everything from me and leave me with nothing, not even my kids. What was I supposed to do? Stick around and let you destroy me?" Her face flushed, and for a moment, she looked like she might argue. But then she sighed and leaned back in her chair. "You're right," she admitted quietly. "I was angry and selfish. But you still left. You abandoned the kids. You abandoned me." Emily's words hung in the air, a mixture of accusation and resignation. I let out a deep breath, steadying myself before responding. "I didn't abandon the kids," I said firmly. "I made sure they had everything they needed. The trust fund covered their education, their living expenses, everything. What I abandoned was a situation that would have broken me completely. You didn't leave me any other choice. Emily scoffed, her lips curving into a bitter smile. You're always so sure you're the victim, aren't you? You think running away made everything better? No, I said, leaning forward. It didn't make anything better, but staying would have made it worse. You were ready to use the courts to take everything from me while keeping Danny in our bed. I couldn't fight you then, but I wasn't going to sit there and let you destroy me. Her eyes flickered with something shame, perhaps, though she quickly masked it. So, what now? She asked, crossing her arms. Are you here to gloat? To show off how great your new life is? I'm here because I want closure, I said, my voice calm but resolute. Not for us, for the kids. They deserve to have parents who aren't constantly at odds. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Emily, and I'm not here to argue. I just want to move forward for their sake. Emily stared at me for a long moment before sighing deeply. The kids adore you, you know, even after everything. They missed you so much. I missed them too, I said softly. Every day. She hesitated, her expression softening ever so slightly. I know I made mistakes, she admitted. Big ones. But so did you. And now the kids are the only thing that matters. So, if you're really back in their lives, I won't stand in the way. Her words were cautious but sincere. For the first time in years, it felt like we were on the same page, at least when it came to the children. Thank you, I said simply. As the tension began to ease, Emily leaned back in her chair, studying me carefully. There's something you should know, Mark, she said, her voice quieter now. I frowned. What is it? Danny came back a few years ago, she said, her tone tinged with bitterness. He begged me to take him back, said he'd made a mistake leaving. For a while, I considered it, but she trailed off, shaking her head. He wasn't the man I thought he was. I kicked him out for good. I raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. And she added, her voice hardening, he told me something about you. About how you left. My heart raced. What did he say? Emily's eyes narrowed. He said you were planning it for months. That you had offshore accounts, fake documents, and a whole scheme to disappear. I felt a surge of anger at Danny for betraying even that, but I forced myself to stay calm. He's not wrong, I admitted. I planned everything because I knew what you were capable of. I knew if I didn't, I'd lose everything. She let out a humorless laugh. I guess I underestimated you. All those years, I thought you were just running scared. Turns out, you were smarter than I gave you credit for. The conversation ended on a tentative note of mutual understanding. We didn't part as friends, but there was no animosity either. For the first time, I felt like the past might truly stay in the past. When I returned home, Sophia was waiting for me on the porch, her eyes searching mine for answers. How did it go? She asked. I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. Better than I expected, I admitted. Worse than I hoped. But it's done. And Emily? She won't get in the way, I said. Not anymore. Sophia smiled softly, leaning her head on my shoulder. Good. Now we can focus on the future. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a weight lift from my chest. My children were back in my life, and the ghosts of my past were finally beginning to fade.